First of all, good morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing well in these Corona times. My name is Karen, and along with Andreas, Raman, and Mia, who couldn't join the call, we set up the Sweden Tech Connect initiative. It's a month now ago, I think. Time goes quickly in Corona. We just did it as a pro bono initiative to try to help people match competencies and companies who are looking for work better, because we thought it was quite inefficient. So we've had over 400 candidates join and 200 job postings, which is fabulous to see. However, one thing that we did also see is that there's, as we already know in the startup scale-up sector that we have in Stockholm, a bit of a mismatch when it comes to skills and job requirements. And one of the fields that is the biggest in is marketing, where a lot of the marketing skills that are being required now of candidates and people have a much more digital approach than traditionally. And this is something that traditional marketing courses or educations haven't perhaps covered. So there's a lot of people who haven't worked with it, but in a transition period as we're in, we thought we would try to do something to try to help people sort of grasp the area. So we're going to take a pretty broad approach to growth marketing and try to take a very big, sort of go wide and then also go into some of the specifics. So we're going to be covering everything from, well, first of all, what is growth marketing? How should companies be thinking about marketing at the moment? Is it more brand building? How does it correlate with sales? But also dive into some of the specifics. What's happening in the Facebook and LinkedIn ad market? What are we seeing in terms of the trends? How should you be thinking about building your lists and engaging with your customers or potential customers? So we're going to do that. Now, I am not an expert in that at all. So thankfully, I have two people here to guide me and to share their expertise. And I'm super excited about this. Firstly, we have Erwan with us. Erwan Derlin is a freelance growth marketing consultant. He is also an operating partner at Luminar Ventures, which is a VC fund here in Stockholm, and a course director for the growth marketing program at Barry's. So he has a wide network and a wide experience when it comes to growth marketing. And he was previously a part of the growth teams at iSettle and Hem.com. And then we also have Carl. Carl Lager is a growth manager at the insurtech company Hedvig here in Stockholm as well. And previously he has been working in the growth teams of both Spotify and Soundtrack Your Brand. So we really have two, I would say, of the best people in Stockholm when it comes to growth marketing. So it's going to be great to hear your expertise. The format as last time is the same. So I'm going to be moderating this and asking questions on various topics. But we are monitoring and want to include you guys as well. So when you have questions or comments or thoughts, please do put them either in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll be monitoring them, and I'll be adding them in where relevant. We can also do a wider Q&A session at the end of the webinar, which is scheduled to go on for an hour. Last time we ran out of time because there was so much to talk about. So we'll see how we go today. But please do write your questions, because this is meant to be a learning session. So we're open to everything. I think, Erwan and Carl, you are open to all questions?
Of course.
Of course, there we go. Cool. But with that said, enough introduction, let's kick things off. Should we start with the basics? What is growth marketing? Who wants to start?
Do you want to go, Erwan?
Okay. Yeah, it's a lot of hype, I think, behind this term, and a lot of buzz. I mean, if you look on Google, you will find like 10,000 different answers. It's pretty new. I would say like the term come from 2010-ish, from Sean Ellis. Back in the days, it was more like growth hacking, and it kind of became growth marketing along the lines. I think it all comes down with new business models. I mean, historically, companies could, I mean, they had the TV basically, and they could, there was not so many competitors. So when you acquired a customer, you could, I mean, this customer would be loyal for a longer period. So you didn't really have to take care about retention and those things. When it comes to marketing, you will be able to spend much more to acquire a customer. So traditional marketing is a lot about awareness and top funnel activities. But with subscription models and freemium type of business models, you really need to take care about the retention, activation part, and then collaborate. So growth marketing, in short, is really like about killing the silos within companies and working together. I mean, using insights and data to collaborate between product and marketing. And I think to go beyond the hype, I think it's all about, I mean, at the end of the day, it's about a mindset. So it's about experimentation and continuous learning. So having micro improvements that will compound over time instead of having big campaigns, like big marketing campaigns that will have pretty like short-term lifespan. It's a pretty broad topic, I would say. Includes product and data and so on.
Carl, do you have anything to add there?
No, I absolutely agree on everything. I think it's a lot about like figuring out where you get most bang for the buck all the time. So you have this kind of, are we focusing on making awareness, or are we focusing right now on making more people that use our service to invite others? Or and you can do that both with marketing and product development. And this kind of place in between of like what can we do right now in order to grow the member base or the user base or the amount of customers we have to our business. And you can do that in all these kind of different fields. And as Erwin is saying, sometimes it's like traditional marketing is all about awareness, and with subscription models and services, it's usually a lot of stuff you can do in between, like to make people stay longer and pay for a longer period of time, but also making the user base to invite others into your service or product.
So if you try to break that down, then what does a workflow normally look like? If you say traditional marketing is more about top funnel, so you think about traditionally as a campaign or similar. What does the workflow then start with? So do you start by looking at the data that's generated in usage, or do you start by, is it top down or is it more bottom up? How do you start that whole process, and how are the what are the, I don't know if you can say that, but are there traditional steps that you take? You start by looking at data and then you do A/B testing and then you do these things, or how does a workflow look?
I think they could be super individual. What we're doing currently at Hedvig, which I think is quite interesting, is we're trying it out. Let's see how that works. But we're actually just in a launch of launching Hedvig into Norway, which we started last week. So we started doing the first kind of experimentation and ads for Norway. Something that we're doing then is that we have a weekly, we call it the weekly growth lab, where we sit people from all the different departments into a room, and then we're kind of trying to see trends of stuff that happened during the last week. And that could be anything from questions that come into customer support to stuff that the product team are seeing not working or converting on the website, to campaign materials that we're doing in the marketing team. And we're trying to see trends of like, who are the people that we're attracting right now, and what things can we do both in the website or in the app or in how we treat customers in the like a customer support team, to make that kind of launch go as good as possible. So but we're trying, previously we've been trying to sit like a monthly basis to look at kind of what's working and what's not working, and find on a monthly basis new kind of experiments and tests that we can do, both on marketing side, but also on our website and in our product.
I think it depends also what stage your company is at. I mean, you've been pretty early at Hedvig, so I guess this process evolved over time. I mean, at the beginning of a company, you don't really have your own data. So I mean, growth marketing is a lot about data, so you need to find data somewhere else. Thankfully, there is a lot of websites where you can have like really good insights about your industry, your competitors, and so on and so forth.
Could you give some examples of that? If you don't have a lot of data in-house, where do you go externally?
Yeah, so my personal favorites are SEMrush, for example, semrush.com, where you can, or like Similar Web for example, where you can really see whether if you have an app or a website, you can see the compares, like where do they get their traffic from, what people are searching for in the industry, and this type of things. And then you can have trends, and you can say, okay, your compares are trying to really focus on this crowd. We should focus maybe here and go to market with this crowd instead. So I mean, that's a lot what I do personally. I'm working mostly with early stage startups, so we try to identify like sustainable go-to-market strategy that don't cost too much, and that are possible to do within a certain amount of time. By the way, I think Carl, you have my name under your
yeah.
under your
Erwan.
Two Erwans.
Yeah. Okay, so those are great sources for external data. How about internal data? If you haven't started with growth marketing, really, how do you go about it? Do you start by setting up a data warehouse, or how do you start to gather that data systematically internally?
I think there are a lot of stuff that you can do without having all that kind of infrastructure in place, as Erwan said. I think there's a lot of external data that you can find, and I think usually when a lot of people are talking about like growth hacking and those kind of things, it's a lot about quantitative data. So like how many people are doing this, how many people are doing this. But I think something that people usually forget is the kind of qualitative data. So what are people saying? What are people feeling? How do they behave, and how do they feel about the stuff that we're doing? So I think something that people usually forget that you can get a lot of data and insights from is, I know it sounds like classic cheesy stuff that everyone is always saying, but like talking to your customers and talking to the people that are the early adopters or the current customers of your service, and trying to kind of do that even more, the stuff that they really like. So I think it is a vague answer to your question, but I think it's a lot of stuff that you can do and collect data-wise that doesn't need to be a data warehouse. It could be a lot of those kind of things as well, and external data like Google Trends and those kind of things, where you can see what is happening right now in the world.
Mm.
Yeah, I agree. I'm happy you mentioned that, because I mean, I see a lot. I mean, because you can track everything these days, I think that I see a lot of, one of the fallacy of many startups is that they try to track everything, but they don't ask themselves the right questions. So they will, instead of trying to really understand why are they trying to track these things, they're looking at more like vanity metrics, and at the end of the day, it's counterproductive. So,
well, what would you classify as some vanity metrics, as you call it? What do you think that are things that usually don't really matter?
yeah, I mean, it depends. I mean, it could be like how many followers do you have on Instagram, or how many visits you have on your website. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really maybe matter. What matters is more like how your funnel works, and what is it that you want to try to achieve for your audience. So you might have like 100,000 followers on Instagram, but if it's not relevant for your business, or if it doesn't really add up to your funnel, it doesn't make sense to track it at all.
And similarly, are there some metrics that you think are under tracked, so that some metrics that people miss out tracking normally?
Yeah, I mean, like Carl said, I mean, I think emotion, for example, I mean, you can't really put a number, hard number on emotion, but at the end of the day, marketing is about, you know, my simple definition of marketing is to transport people from like in their journey. Basically, you want to get them from A to B through a product or service. So you want to see where is their first emotion, where do they start? Like, for example, now there's a lot of people that are fearing for their job, fearing for will they get, you know, if you are a student, will you get a job after your graduation, and these kind of things, and where do you want to take them in terms of emotionally, and you know, how will they feel? Because if your product and service manage to do that, they will definitely talk about you later, and then what will happen is that there will be a I mean, growth is a lot about loops and virality. And the best way to make people, you know, love your product is to give them emotions and to transport them from A to B with those emotions. So I mean, in there, you don't need data warehouse to do that. You really need to speak with your users on a very ongoing basis, on a genuine basis.
Yeah, do you think that often growth marketing and growth hacking, as it was called before, as you said, it sounds very technical and it sounds difficult. Do you think it's over dramatized? Sort of, is it easier than we think it is to get started with it? I mean, how would you go about starting?
I think there's so many stuff that like for every different company, there's different ways of growth hacking. I think the people that initially brought this kind of thinking to the table was companies like Airbnb and Pinterest and all these like big tech companies that had so much infrastructure when it came to data. And I think those were the kind of people that were the foundation of this kind of theme and way of working. But I think it's something that could be applied for anything, no matter if you have a big tech company or if you have a small shop on the street. I think it's this kind of way of constantly trying to learn of what's working and what's not working and iterating on. I think the classic thing of marketing is it's kind of like you come up with an idea and then you put a lot of time into producing a kind of marketing campaign, and then you go live and then you hope for the best. While growth marketing in a lot of ways are like trying something small and then see if you get some traction, and then you add up and doing that once again, but with even more, and then you add up and add up and add up until you have found some kind of way of marketing or selling your service that works and actually are gaining customers. So I think that could be applied no matter if you have a lot of data or a big tech company or if you're a small shop, but this kind of way of working where you constantly iterate on your marketing. I think it's really interesting.
And do you have certain tools that you use? I'm trying to make this as applicable as possible for people, but are there tools, software? What do you use in your day-to-day job?
Yeah, I mean, there's many tools. I mean, it depends because it's pretty broad. I mean, the answer is always it depends. Like basically there is many tools for different purposes. So you really need to be on top. I mean, the market is changing very fast. So you need to be on top of course, of new things, but there are usual suspects. I mean, of course, you want to use Google Analytics and data tools. You want to use, I mean, maybe if you have an app like Amplitude and this type of tools to track behaviors on your website, you want to maybe use Hotjar to track what people are, how people are behaving on your website. And it's really about behavior. So, I mean, there's tons of tools. It will take much more than an hour to go through all these tools. I'm sure, like I see some questions. I see that Jesper is here. He has great content on YouTube talking about tools. So go and check his blog, and there's many other lists online. But yeah, at the end of the day, there is a tool for a purpose. So you really need to focus on what purpose do you want to fill, and then ask yourself the right questions. I think that's the good start to go with. As you said, Kai, it doesn't need to be a big thing. You just need, it's iterative. So it's about small improvements all the time instead of trying to look for silver bullets. You really want to find like, okay, how do I improve a little bit, like maybe 0.1% for like tomorrow, and just get started at the end of the day. And then being consistent is super important, because if you're not consistent, then I mean those 0.1% don't really mean anything unless you do it like every day.
And how did you guys get into, if a person is sitting here listening to the call and they didn't they are currently maybe in traditional marketing more, or they want to move into the growth field, or maybe they come from a sales background and want to try to add more marketing skills to their tool belt. How do you recommend starting? How did you learn your skills? Do you need to go a formal education? Are there good ones out there? Or how do you learn about growth marketing?
I got in contact with it initially from a course called Reforge, which is an American coursework that they basically have put together a lot of people that have been working with this. It's a very, like, in one sense, practical way of learning, but it was like a 3-month program. But I think it's, they also have a lot of blogs out there with a lot of enthusiastic people that have been writing about this. So I would say the most of the stuff that I learned from that kind of course, they have on their own blog as well. So I think that's an amazing place to go for kind of information of these kind of like how the mechanics works on growth marketing and the kind of tools you could use and the things you could use. So I think Reforge, I think it's reforge.com. They have a blog that is absolutely amazing regarding this. And there's a lot of forums out there. It feels like the people that are doing this, it's a lot of people that are trying to help each other out, which I think it's quite nice with this kind of field, because there's very few people that are competing against each other in terms of acquiring users or people to their product or service, because usually you have the same customer, but they can buy a lot of different stuff. So a lot of people are helping each other out. And I think that's the foundation of how they started that program. It was basically a lot of people from different startups that jointly took a course together, basically, and learned each other. And I think that's how it started. So those kind of things are really good.
Yeah, for me, I mean, growth marketing as a term didn't really exist when I started. So I did the MBA. I graduated in 2009, so it was a crisis as well. So I actually I did start in a digital marketing agency, which is interesting. At that time, it was really not, I mean, trendy to work in digital. That's what I could find, actually. So my academic background has nothing to do with digital marketing. I didn't have one single hour about, you know, Facebook or Google in my curriculum. So I had to learn a lot by myself and through the agency, of course. And as you said, I mean, Carl, there's so many blogs. So I mean, I think I started with, I mean, I felt really passionate about it. So I mean, every evening and weekends, I was trying to read more. I think a good way to learn is actually to launch your own project. So buy a website, you know, buy a domain and build your own website. Do tests. It doesn't cost anything. You don't need the permission from anyone. Start a YouTube channel, start, you know, anything that you are passionate about and see how you can grow it. Like try to get 100 visitors to that blog or 100 followers to that YouTube channel. And you will try to understand and then read those blogs from experts and try to apply what they are saying. And then you will learn a lot by doing. And on top of that, you will get a really nice piece on your portfolio that you can use during interviews, and that's interesting to an interesting way to differentiate yourself with other candidates. So yeah, learn by doing. I think it will be my best tips. I always launch side projects just to keep learning. I mean, like you guys did with Sweden Tech Connect, I guess. Just like, you know, it's only 6 weeks in. I mean, you probably learn a lot. I mean, how to grow the community and you know, so yeah, it doesn't cost anything. That's the nice part about the internet. There's a lot of free information. So just do, just go and try.
And that's a great tip, I think, to people in between jobs or looking to transition careers. If you don't feel you have the relevant skill sets, that's something that came up in our previous webinar. The Chief People Officer of Truecaller said that we're 100% open to people who don't have experience in the sector that we're in. But as long as you can show what transferable skills you have, that's the key thing. And that's sort of what you're referring to as well there. When if you can do something on your side as well and start to build out your own portfolio or company or idea or blog or whatever it is, that shows initiative, and it starts to be able to create those bridges between your maybe old sector to your new sector. But we're having a couple of questions come in now. There's a lot of interest in when you guys talk about asking the right questions and going under the hood and all those things. People would like to hear if you have sort of an example or a case study of how this actually works in practice. So what are some of the right questions you you should ask, for example. So I don't know if you guys have an example of a situation or something similar that you can actually go through the practicals and what right questions are versus wrong questions, etc.
I have a quite funny example of when we didn't ask the right questions and what happened,
Okay.
and kind of what we learned from it. But it's so when I worked at Soundtracker Brand, we were basically our kind of campaign that we were doing was trying to figure out how we could acquire business owners to buy the background music services of the Spotify Business and Soundtrack. And one of the campaigns that we were running for quite a long time or tried out was that we saw quite often that a lot of people were looking for kind of licenses for their music. So people were going to Google and they Googled for like license for background music in a retail store. But we also saw that they were searching for the specific kind of licenses. They have I think 8 different ones, except for example, BMI, which is a license that people usually use. So we were starting to say, okay, but let's make sure that we build articles that people can read about this on our website. But then we also built a kind of campaign site. So if you were Googling for any of these kind of things, we bought the kind of top search keyword that you can get on Google, and we paid for that. So people were, if they were Googling something, they got us as kind of a first recommendation. And then we saw that a lot of people were going into that page and a lot of people were signing up on that page. But something we also saw when looking at the data was that almost like 80% of the people coming in from that campaign page, they canceled their subscription 2 days later. So first of all, we were celebrating and saying that this is awesome. We get a lot of customers from this campaign, but then we saw that most people were canceling 2 days later. And then we basically sent out like plain emails. So we started emailing back to customers and asking them why they left the service. And a trend that we saw in a lot of people coming from our campaign was musicians that wanted to get money for their music. And then we went back to the campaign page. We saw that everything that we were talking about on the campaign page was like to have the proper license to pay back to the people or the musicians. So what actually happened was that a lot of people that were searching were not business owners. It was musicians that wanted to get money for their the music played in stores. And then we first of all said, here is the music service that pays back to the musicians. And then they come to a campaign page talking about it, and then they sign up, and then they said, but this is not how I can get music payment for my music. It's basically just a music service. But I think that was the kind of a super easy question and something that we could have been doing way before, and not only looking at, oh, we're getting a lot of customers, but also figuring out who are these and did they actually get what they thought they would buy. But yeah, that's just like super, like a very basic question, but it helped us a lot in that kind of process.
Yeah, I think like to rebound on this, I mean, not to give a concrete example right now, but like I think right questions, I mean, the way to maybe phrase it is more like, I mean, everything has an alternative effect. So, I mean, if you really focus on conversion rate, for example, you might be forgetting a little bit about other things. So let's say, I mean, there's a lot of optimization you can do, change colors, change the value proposition, and the naming of a button, for example. And that's where I see a lot of growth hacker like spending a lot of their time. But then what does that impact? So you see, for example, a lot of websites, they will want more people to their newsletter, and they will start say, okay, we will do a big button and maybe like a big pop-up to get more newsletter subscribers. And yeah, the number will go up most probably because it takes more space and it's hard to close it. But then when you need to ask yourself as well, is like, how annoying is that for the people that don't go through, and that might be your best customers. And there's few data points that will actually tell you that unless you speak with your customers. So you always need to think about the trade-offs. I think that's a better way to phrase it. What are the trade-offs because every decision has a trade-off. So every time you try to optimize something, it will have a positive or negative impact on something else. So you really need to think about the big picture, and then like testing a specific element, and then see how did that impact the rest. And so you really don't need to one metric. I mean, a bad A/B testing is just like trying to, I mean, also we are humans, so we have a lot of bias, and you know, it's easy to find a test that will confirm your bias basically, and tell you the answer that you are trying to find. So it's really trying to be objective about your own testing and about your own questions, so it doesn't really like just, hey, this go up, good, I have a good grade. So it's kind of sometimes very academic. And I mean, just to go against what we said before about the blogs, I mean, you really need to have a critical eye on what's online. So there is a lot of blogs that are, you know, oh, I increased my traffic by 1,500% and things like that. And it's very common in growth marketing that you have this type of blog post. You know, like you always need, that's why you really need do your own test and try to have your own thesis about marketing and growth marketing, and you know, look at these blogs, but it's not necessarily the truth, or like it's a truth for one website, it doesn't apply to everyone. So that's why I think, like, ask yourself the questions that are relevant to you and the trade-offs that are relevant to you.
And looking at the current opportunities that are out there, if we take a step back in this Corona COVID crisis, there's of course a lot of challenges in the marketing department when it comes to how hard should you be pushing sales, how much should you be doing on brand building, do people have money to spend, all those things. How do you approach brand strategy at the moment? How are you thinking about it? Is it about maximizing awareness, or building a funnel, or trying to close deals, or keeping current customers? I mean, what is, in your opinion, a good brand strategy at the moment?
You're launching a new brand card, so yeah. So,
no, I think I'm not the brand expert, but I think it's something that I've been thinking of when seeing a lot of companies doing marketing right now. It feels like a lot of people are doing everything they can to kind of gain this kind of short-term wins, of like, we need to do this right now. And I think that's usually, it's something you always, it's hard building brand and keeping your brand, and at the same time kind of doing these short-term wins. So that is something that I think you should look up for. But I think
when you talk about short-term wins, sorry to interrupt, just
no, but like super aggressive campaigns, and like overselling the kind of things you're doing, and you see a lot of brands going from this kind of visionary standpoint to having super aggressive sales deals, which I think could be something that you can do in a very short time, but it's hard to do it constantly. But I think there are a lot of like cost-efficient way to acquire users digitally that I think that a lot of companies can use. And like in traditional marketing, as going back to you always need to bring this kind of big awareness, and you couldn't really know, okay, we're spending this, how much do we get from it? But I feel that a lot of companies right now have close to no marketing budgets. So some of the companies being in these crises, they can't spend a couple of $1,000s and hope that they're getting customers, because they need to know, we're spending this, we're getting this. And I think that's the kind of one of the beauties with digital marketing, where there are a lot of alternatives online today, where you can basically say that you're only paying for a customer. And that could be, for instance, affiliate marketing, which I think is very good in these kind of times, where you partner up with, if that's people that have blogs, or you partner up with other companies that could sell your product, and you're basically selling your product on a commission basis instead. So you're telling them that we can pay this amount of money for getting a customer, and then you can sell that in the way that you want through your channels. So that could be a blog, that could be a website like refonder.com, where you can get deals and those kind of things. So I think that could be an alternative for companies with no marketing budget at all right now, where you basically go from selling on an ad level to like a commission level, and saying that if you gain a customer for us, we're willing to pay this. And people are still spending a lot of money. People are still buying stuff. It's just that you need to find the kind of way that goes with your financial situation. And then I think for us at Hedvig, it's kind of a weird positioning, because we're one of the kind of industries where still a lot of like people will always need insurance. So we haven't got really that like affected of this. I would say actually the opposite side. People are more tendency to buy insurance in these sites. But I think I see in a lot of companies and a lot of people that I have friends working at, they're trying to go from this kind of way of selling through awareness marketing to selling more on kind of a specific, if that's commissions or if that's partnering up with other companies. So a lot of companies right now are partnering up with each other and helping each other out instead of spending them on those kind of money on Facebook, which I think is very, very effective. So I think there's a lot of brand collaborations that are happening right now. So if you have the same kind of customers, you can help each other out. And companies like Gigster in Stockholm and Voi going together and building their business model together in like 2 weeks of time, I thought was amazing, of combining their kind of two companies into building and launching a product in just a week of time that is fit for these situations.
Yeah, I agree. You can use SparkToro. I see a lot of questions about tools. I mean, SparkToro is a good tool to do just that, where you can find tap into audience that are similar to other brands and things like that. Yeah, I mean, for branding, I mean, there is no playbook. I mean, obviously, like a lot of businesses are in different situations right now. Some are surging, some are struggling, and there is no answer. I mean, if you are in hospitality, there is not much you can do right now. Like the best is to really build up for when the economy will get back and when, you know, the lockdowns in different countries will be lifted. So, but there is a lot you can do to prepare. I think there's two axes there. Is like on one axis is like what are your competitors doing. There's a lot of wait and see out there. Like a lot of people doing nice slides right now and PowerPoints instead of actually acting. So that's an opportunity for you. If you see that your competitors are in a wait and see position, you need to act now, because you know you can really gain market share because they're asking themselves too many questions basically. And then the other axis is obviously your customers. So you really need to read the room and understand where they are standing, listen to them. Are they scared? Are they pumped? Or like, are they? Do they have still capital? Do they have? Are they struggling right now? So then, based on these insights, you can review your value proposition. We see a lot of companies, I mean, including Zoom, for example, that have been responding very fast to new pricing strategy, opening like free, for example, a free tier for schools, because there is 1.3 billion students working from like studying from home now. So I think that was and obviously that had a really good impact on their user base, and hopefully they will manage to convert schools down the road. So there is, I think, like pricing is an under utilized strategy during these times, where you can really look at your value prop, adapt your copywriting as well, like all your automated emails. You need to review that and see, okay, should we really say that, or can we skip this part because it's kind of awkward right now to say this, and like maybe instead of focusing on being fast and secure, maybe you can say we are affordable and we will save you money on that side if it's a concern for your audience, and adapt your pricing strategy as accordingly. So that's really where like marketing and sales can work together and collaborate, having both quantitative.
To dig into, because I think if we look at, so I was reading a newsletter. So I come from the edtech industry, and of course, edtech is booming usage-wise. However, the latest industry report that came out a couple of days ago says that a lot of edtech companies are actually in big trouble because they're all giving it out for free. which means much higher costs because of the cloud and hosting and onboarding and all these things. And it actually doesn't mean like that the end user will have money at the end of the day to buy their tool anyway. So it's actually, yes, it's good for usage, but business-wise, it's actually not good for them. So how do you approach that topic from a sort of growth marketing point of view? How do you, so say you go out, you decide to make your tool free, which a lot of companies are approaching, as you said. How do you then manage the funnel from a growth marketing point of view to try to ensure that you maximize the chance of them converting to a paid customer at the end of this period? Do you start that conversation early on? Or, I mean, it's a bit of a sales territory as well, but I'm guessing there has growth marketing input there as well.
I can answer quick on that one. I think it's all about providing value. So it depends. I mean, of course, if you give something away for free and you give the whole thing, there's no extra value. So that's going to be very hard to ask for more if you, like down the road. So, I mean, first of all, you need to have your data. So you need to, if you open up for free your product, you need to at least ask for a piece of data, which is, it could be an email address, or most often it will be an email address. Maybe you can already I've seen a lot of tools, asking your credit card details to be already there. So then, it's going to be much easier to upgrade. That's one of the things you can do on the onboarding side. And then it's more like, if your product was not free before, you really need to adapt the whole thing. Then, I mean, the whole user journey and the product lifecycle. Because as I said, like if you want to upgrade later, you need to have some sort of extra value. And if it's the same product or very similar, there's no reason people will upgrade because they get it for free, or like they've been used to. Also, like there's a routine factor, which if people are used to have it for free, it's going to be very hard to change that routine later on, which I think will happen in EdTech, as you mentioned, where this is a new routine for them. I mean, like using Zoom in universities or schools is not something that they were doing before. And that was not actually a very good segment for Zoom prior to that. So they need to really think about how they want to approach that tier and that segment down the road, which they didn't really have time to. I think they really just, okay, let's help out, which is good at the end of the day. I mean, they really helped out, and now they will need to figure out, okay, how do we take care or provide value for these users later on when there's a mix between school and maybe online homeworks and this type of things.
Carl, do you have any?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's there's a lot of different. I thought about when you mentioned this kind of. It's going to be super interesting to follow the kind of streaming services that have spiked, because they're giving almost everything at once. Like you don't get some kind of like you need to pay extra for getting some. You get everything for 30 days, and then they hopefully keep them, or people will go on a new trial and a new trial and a new trial and a new trial. But I think it's a few companies that manage to do this, of like providing value, but if you wanted the whole thing or like the next level of stuff, you're paying for it. And I think those are the companies that are really succeeding with this, as Erwin is saying. I think a great example is Typeform that we use heavily, and I've been using at the previous companies as well. It's an amazing way of you can build up like super easy sign-up flows for your service, but it's also sending out surveys to your customers and all those kind of things, where they've managed to give a free product that is really, really nice. It's like 10x better than any other kind of form that you can use. But then they've added on even more features that you can use for if you have like a bigger company, and that could be like having more people that could have access to the service. So for free, you have one, but if you are more than one person, which usually the larger companies have, then you need to pay extra. Or if you want to take out their branding, so the form looks like something you built yourself and not them, then you need to pay extra. And they have all these kind of small things as they, I guess that they know that bigger companies will easily pay for. But they're also giving the whole kind of thing for free to people that have smaller businesses that doesn't really matter for them if it's a small Typeform logo. But then these people, when they're starting at other companies, they say, hey, I use at my old company amazing stuff. And I think Slack is also a good example of like they're introducing or they're giving access to everything, but then if you reach to one limit where you can't look back in the history and then you need to pay, and then people have been using that service for a while, and then they get the option to pay and they say it's a no-brainer at that point. So yeah, there's a few companies that really succeeded with this.
And for the companies that do have money to spend still on marketing, what are you guys seeing on SEOs and ads when it comes to LinkedIn, Facebook, etc.? Because anecdotally, I've heard that they've dropped quite a lot. I don't know if that's still the case. But how are you guys recommending companies to work with those types of tools at the moment?
You want to go or like pause?
No, yeah, you go.
Okay. Number like I think yeah. I mean, as for SEO, I mean, there's not much change. I mean, the main change is that there is more traffic online these days because people are. So there is a shift to much more online consumption. So, but SEO takes so much time to actually pay dividends that, you know, it's a really good channel to focus on now because it doesn't cost anything. And it's all about listening to your users and what they are searching for. But at the end of the day, if your business is struggling, it's not the right channel because it's not gonna give you results right now. So if you have money to spend, it's much better to do affiliate marketing like Carl suggested earlier, or performance channels like Facebook. So what I've seen personally with my kind of own campaigns or with data that I've seen online is that in March, it was a huge dip, like probably like 25% to 30% dip in CPM. So it's the cost per 1,000 impressions. So, which is normal because it's an auction, so less advertisers out there, meaning like it's cheaper. What's interesting though is that I see data that shows that since last week, I mean, at least internationally, I don't think in Sweden, since we didn't have lockdowns in the same way than in France, for example, or in Italy. I mean, now Italy and France released their kind of end date of the lockdown last week. So what I see is that it's not back to normal yet, but there's a trend upwards in CPM and kind of back to normal type of activity online when it comes to advertising. A good example, I was looking at SimilarWeb just earlier today. So Booking.com traffic and Airbnb's traffic increased by 30% last week on week. So people are getting back to kind of plan maybe their vacation or look if things will go back to normal in their country, what could they do during the summer? I think that's kind of the kind of trends I see, at least from my side. But yeah, there will be a lot of fluctuation. My hypothesis is that there's gonna be a lot of fluctuation that's gonna be an ongoing situation for probably many months. So it's really important to look at your data every day and kind of look at your industry every day.
Yeah, and I think we've seen since we have been doing marketing all the time during this kind of phase, you can see this kind of how it have been moving back and forth. But I think to be super honest, I also read a lot about like how Facebook got cheaper. We've never actually seen that on our end, and I don't know if it's because we're active in Sweden and a lot of Swedes have a hypothesis that I have is that Facebook is still this kind of marketing tool that a lot of people know how to use. It's very like easy to understand how to build campaigns in one way or another, and they made that kind of process very easy. So I think when a few companies stopped, a few other companies started even more, and there have been actually increased spend of like e-commerce companies in Sweden, which makes this kind of, if you would see every platform as a storefront where you have a window and then everyone is bidding on being seen in that window, there have been way more people in this kind of people that have seen the ads. There's way more activity on different social medias, But on Facebook, which is kind of a very popular way of doing marketing, a lot of e-commerce companies have been bombarding with money within the few last weeks. So from our end, we've actually seen kind of a flat on Facebook and Instagram. Something we have seen, which I think is interesting, is that it had been very, very cheap for us to do advertisement on for example, Pinterest and on YouTube. And I think that's because it's not as a popular way of just like putting on a quick campaign, but also it's these kind of social media that have been increasing a lot in usage. So a lot of people have extra time, which they can spend on YouTube and Pinterest. And those are the kind of medias that a lot of people are then going to now when they have a lot of extra time, but not as many advertisers have gone there with putting up ads. So I think more people came to Facebook and Instagram, but also a lot of e-commerce businesses are having an amazing time right now and just like pushing in even more money into those buckets. So it really depends, but I think you should see it as kind of as I think a growth hack right now is figuring out what are the kind of social medias or platforms or places where a lot of people spend time right now that hopefully other marketers or companies are not doing ads.
What about the TikTok? Is that coming? Are you there already?
We don't have a super focus. We don't have a TikTok account, but we're doing ads on TikTok through Facebook audience networks. So we choose on Facebook audience network to be reached at TikTok as well. So if we're doing campaigns that get seen on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok.
Yeah. So a follow-up question from an audience member here. When you mentioned the Airbnb and Booking.com traffic figures, what are the sources to that? Could you recommend a few sources when you want to look at traffic trends of a market?
Sure. So it's still SimilarWeb. Actually, they have. I will put it in the. I don't know. Should I put it in the Q&A or like in the chat?
Yeah, you can put it in the chat. I think there's a lot of interest in this, so we'll compile some kind of list of.
So here, so SimilarWeb/coronavirus. So they have a dashboard that they update every day, and you can see kind of stats about different industries, and also like what's interesting to see there is like traffic to coronavirus related topic. And I think that's something you really want to see, like showing that people are tired right now to read about news about this bad news. So you see the trend about coronavirus related terms, and I think we all feel the same, that we check less and less what's going on a per hour basis, at least, like we maybe did in March. And then you can see like trends in fashion and e-commerce, as Carl mentioned. I mean, food delivery and obviously and edtech and these type of things. Another good platform I can recommend, I can send it as well in the chat. So here's more like for what we were discussing about CPM. Here you can go here, and it's more the second link.
Yeah.
So Go within Co, retail pulse. Now you can see pretty much like how trends have been affected in different sectors.
Yeah. We have a couple of more minutes. Do post any questions if you have it. We have one more question here from the audience. And this person would like to know more about the customer relationship building, the emotional touch points you guys talked about when doing marketing, bringing out the story and advertising from the customer's point of view, what's in it for me, etc. How can I look at this through the funnel in a startup without sounding like everyone else? What do you guys say?
It's hard. I think usually there's a few like questions that usually I think is very good to ask, and something that we've done previously that I could highly recommend is there's a super basic question, but it's very effective, which is if we would not exist today, how would you feel? And then you could say that you felt not disappointed, a bit disappointed, or very disappointed. And then we picked up the people that said that they would be very disappointed, and we actually called them and talked to them why they would be very disappointed. Those are the kind of power users, and those are the people that really seen the value in your service, and pick out those kind of raisins or whatever that is, and do something with it. It's super effective. And for us, you always have this kind of inside out thinking that you think that this is why people are choosing your service, and then you ask them and there could be some completely different reason. But I think combining that kind of first question, finding those power users or those people that are really big fans of what you're doing, and then ask them and talk to them about why they picked you, I think it's extremely effective.
I agree. Do you mean for startups? Was the question for startups? Or
yeah, the question was for startups. Yeah,
so I mean, yeah, I really agree. I mean, it's a good question to ask. I mean, the problem with asking questions sometimes to users is like, I mean, there's a bias as well there. Like they might kind of tell you what you want to hear sometimes, especially early stage, because you have still a lot of friends maybe, or kind of a community that is close to you when you're a startup at early stage. So they might just tell you what you want to hear. So I think like I mean, the best way to sell anyway is not to sell anything. So you really want to kind of gain that trust and see if people will come back to you anyway. So then if you really want to succeed now, I think my best tips on kind of fitting with the emotion is really and there's two ways to really succeed online. Is either like inform and educate, or entertain. And I think that if you use those two spectrum, basically, you can really match with the emotions of people and see if they care or not. So then you will have data points like that are a little bit less biased than if you ask them questions that you kind of want to have answers from. So I don't know if I'm super clear there, but I will put a lot of content and create a lot of value and see if people actually react. That's a good way to feel like, okay, are people on the same? Do I understand actually what they are feeling at the moment, or am I way off? And if there is no engagement and there is no response, then you know, like, okay, maybe you should adapt your content strategy and how you talk to your users. So it's a mix and match between what Carl said and what I'm saying. So listening and creating, you really need to do both. And then you need to, I mean, like growth marketing, you really need to experiment and adapt fast to the changes. But yeah, educate and entertain. People are bored right now.
We're running out of time now. So do you guys have anything else, final points you want to say that you feel we haven't touched upon, or are you happy campers? No.
If there's any students there, or like, you know, people that maybe, I think we focused a lot on companies. And we did kind of round up around growth marketing. So if there is anyone that kind of, I mean, that is part of your community that has lost job recently, or that's a bit lost, I mean, I'm happy to take a meeting with you guys and just answer your questions on a separate forum. I know it can be hard to kind of ask it maybe openly like now, in the webinar that is recorded and everything. So if you want to have more like a private discussion and just tips how to get to the market, I'm happy to help out, and I'm sure Carl as well. So
yeah,
I'll let you.
Same. No, but same here.
You can't say no now that Erwin said that.
Exactly.
No, but like, yes, if there's anything that we can help out with, just reach out. I think it's go back to the kind of thing we discussed before, that this kind of community of growth marketers have a high tendency to help out each other, and I think that's something that I really like about the community of people working with this. So yeah, just reach out.
Great. Well, on that note, thank you both so much for sharing your time and your expertise. I learned a lot, really good insights, and I'm sure we've all gained some knowledge and have a lot to learn. We will try to compile that post of all the resources that we've been talking about. There's been a lot of interest in that, so we'll try to get something out on LinkedIn as well, on Sweden Tech Connect, where we're posting these things. So please do go follow us and look out for that there. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And I hope you guys stay safe out there, and we will speak again soon.